This is such a lovely surprise for Christmas. Tell me more we're here together. I love the holiday spirit and meeting new people.
A cold wind swept across the town square, carrying with it the soft chime of distant church bells and the scent of roasting chestnuts. Christmas lights shimmered against the pale winter daylight, but to Arian Halden everything felt dimmer than it should have. She sat alone at a small outdoor cafe table beneath a patio heater that barely pushed back the chill, her breath forming thin clouds in the air. She had arrived early perhaps, filled with a hope that felt childish but still warm. It was supposed to be a Christmas blind date arranged by her well-meaning co-worker, a chance to finally feel wanted again after months of loneliness following a painful breakup. But as minutes slid into an hour, the truth settled in quietly, like snow on a silent roof. He wasn't coming. And worse, he had sent a single text just minutes before she arrived, a message she hadn't checked until now, apologizing and saying he'd chosen to go in another direction. Before the story unfolds, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the gentle magic that finds people when they least expect it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Arian placed her phone face down and exhaled slowly. Her heart wasn't broken. She reminded herself of that. But there was a deeper ache, the ache of feeling overlooked, dismissed before she even had the chance to show who she was. The world around her sparkled for everyone else, couples strolling with linked arms, families laughing, children tugging parents toward toy stalls. Christmas was supposed to feel warm. Instead, she felt the sting of rejection settle in her chest like frostbite. She stirred the hot cocoa that had long since cooled, watching the thin swirl of chocolate ripple like fading hope. She wondered if she should leave before the afternoon crowds grew thicker, but she stayed, perhaps out of stubbornness, perhaps out of a fragile desire not to return to the empty apartment that awaited her. The cafe's patio was surrounded by garlands, bows, and tall aluminum heaters humming with a soft metallic buzz. The owner played gentle carols through a small speaker, and overhead, the sky remained a pale winter blue streaked with streaks of soft gold from the lowering sun. Arian tried to ground herself in the beauty around her, reminding herself that a single rejection didn't define her worth. But when you're sitting alone on Christmas Day, trying to believe in love while brushing away disappointment, the world can feel unfairly heavy. When she finally decided it was time to go, she lifted her purse from the back of her chair. But before she could rise, a tiny shadow appeared at the edge of the table. A little girl, no more than 7, stood near her leg, clutching a stuffed fox, missing a button eye. Her pink coat was dusted with bits of snow, and her eyes were wide, brown, and startlingly gentle. She looked up with a soft smile that didn't seem to belong to a stranger at all, but to someone who saw something invisible yet true. Arian blinked, unsure she was meant to respond, until the child's voice came out in the faint hush of winter air. She asked if they could join her. Arian's first instinct was confusion. Why her? Why now? But before she could piece together a response, the girl's father stepped into sight. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee and an apologetic expression. His name, she later learned, was Corvin Hale, and while his presence didn't strike her immediately as extraordinary, something about his quiet warmth felt like a gentle hand brushing away the cold. He had the look of a man who had weathered storms but still believed in clear skies, even if he didn't expect them anymore. As he approached, he apologized for the interruption, explaining that his daughter, Maribel, had spotted Arian sitting alone and worried she might be sad. The child had insisted they ask to sit with her, and somehow, in a moment that felt small but cosmic, Arian heard herself say yes. Corvin thanked her with a grateful nod before taking the seat across from her, while Maribel plopped her stuffed fox onto the table as if introducing a new friend. What began as a polite, brief interaction grew unexpectedly richer. Corvin explained that this was their first Christmas without Maribel's mother. It had been a year of adjustment, grief, and learning to rebuild small routines. He and Marable had planned a simple father-daughter afternoon, but Marable was unusually perceptive, he admitted, always noticing when others were hurting, even strangers. Listening to him, Arian felt the icy loneliness inside her shift, melting slowly as she connected to their honesty and vulnerability. She shared her own story in pieces, not out of obligation, but because the moment felt somehow meant. She confessed that her blind date had abandoned her, and instead of pity, Corvin offered a soft understanding that made her feel seen rather than judged. As the afternoon unfolded, the sunlight brightened and cast a golden glow across the square. The three of them sat together, as though they'd always been meant to cross paths. Marable chattered between sips of warm apple cider, telling stories about her fox and the Christmas tree they decorated themselves. Her laughter was so wholehearted that it painted the air brighter than the lights strung across the cafe patio. Arian found herself smiling more than she had in months, the weight in her chest lifting as she felt the refuge of unexpected companionship. The more Arian listened to Corvin talk, the more she became aware of the quiet strength in his voice. He carried a sadness that didn't overshadow his kindness. He laughed gently, reacted sincerely, and engaged with the world as someone who had loved deeply and lost deeply, yet refused to shut down that part of himself. Arian admired that more than she could express. And somewhere between shared pastries and stories about holiday traditions, she realized she was no longer thinking about the man who rejected her earlier. Instead, she wondered why she felt so connected to two strangers she had just met. They ended up staying far longer than anyone expected. The daylight grew richer, the air warmer from the patio heaters, and the atmosphere around them turned into a small sanctuary carved from an otherwise busy Christmas crowd. Arian didn't need romance at that moment. She didn't even yearn for it. What she felt instead was something purer, a sense of belonging, a sense that humanity still offered gentle surprises. People often dismissed lonely men and women on holidays as figures of pity, but she realized today that connections didn't need to be planned or perfect to be meaningful. Sometimes the heart just needed a moment of honest company to feel alive again. Corvin eventually checked his watch, surprised by how quickly time had passed. It was nearing the late afternoon, and the sun began to sink into a soft haze beyond the rooftops. He asked if Arian would like to walk with them through the Christmas market before they left. She hesitated, but Marable tugged her glove with small, hopeful fingers, and Arian knew she couldn't refuse. The three of them strolled through festive stalls, selling handmade ornaments, wool scarves, candles, fresh pastries, and hand-painted trinkets. Marable held Arian's hand as though she had known her for years. Corvin stayed at her side, and Arian felt a strange but reassuring sensation, almost like stepping into a parallel life she never knew she wanted. As they walked, Arian sensed something stirring inside her, something like courage returning in steady waves. She didn't feel rejected anymore. She didn't feel alone. And for the first time in a long while, she felt worthy, not because someone chose her, but because people she hadn't expected had seen her and welcomed her without judgment. When they reached the large Christmas tree in the center of the square, a gentle snowfall began, soft flakes drifting like tiny whispers of grace. Marable gasped in delight, spinning in slow circles. Corvin looked at Arian, and instead of awkwardness, there was a calm acknowledgment between them. Their lives had brushed against each other in a way that felt fated, yet entirely grounded, blossoming not from desperation, but from simple human warmth. Near the end of their walk, Corvin asked if Arian might like to see them again, perhaps after the holidays, perhaps as friends, perhaps just to grab coffee sometime. There was no pressure in his voice, only sincerity. And inside her, something quietly bloomed. She agreed, not with a sense of obligation, but with genuine hope, not for romance necessarily, but for the continuity of this newfound connection that felt healthy, pure, and strengthening. As they parted ways, Marable hugged her around the waist, whispering that she hoped Arian wouldn't be lonely anymore. Arian knelt to squeeze her gently, her eyes growing warm with tears she didn't hide. When she rose, Corvin extended a final nod of gratitude, soft, humble, and filled with something unspoken yet deeply felt. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light to keep these stories alive and reaching those who need them. And before we close, here is a special request line. Comment below and share the kindness you've experienced or hope to give in your own life. With that, the story of a rejected Christmas blind date becomes something much greater, a reminder that the world still surprises us, that compassion finds us when hope grows thin, and that sometimes the love we need arrives gently, carried by a little girl in a pink coat asking the simplest, most life-changing question: can we join you?